The air in the federal courtroom had been thick with anticipation, a palpable tension clinging to the oak-paneled walls and settling over the rows of expectant faces. For days, the trial of Shaun Diddy Combmes had unfolded with a grim procession of witnesses, each adding another layer to the complex and disturbing tapestry of allegations. Today, however, held a different kind of expectancy, a silent question mark hanging in the air as everyone awaited the next scheduled witness. Nobody, not the seasoned reporters hunched over their laptops, not the battery of lawyers whispering strategic maneuvers, not even the ever-watchful jury could have predicted the seismic shift that was about to occur. Then, the heavy double doors at the rear of the courtroom creaked open, a hushed sound that nonetheless cut through the ambient murmur. Every head swiveled, every gaze fixed on the figure that now stood framed in the doorway. It was Will Smith. A collective gasp rippled through the room, an involuntary exhalation of disbelief and shock. Even Judge Thompson, who had maintained a stoic and impartial demeanor throughout the proceedings, seemed to momentarily freeze, his pen hovering above his notepad. There had been no prior announcement, no pre-written statement circulated among the press, no indication whatsoever that one of Hollywood's brightest stars would be making an unscheduled appearance. Will Smith simply stood there, a solitary figure stepping forward into the tense arena on his own volition. Until this moment, Will Smith's name had been a phantom presence in the unfolding drama, swirling through leaked headlines, whispered audio recordings deemed too volatile for public consumption, and the hushed conversations that permeated the courthouse hallways. He had remained conspicuously silent as the accusations against Diddy mounted, his absence from the proceedings fueling further speculation. But something had clearly shifted within him. Perhaps it was the relentless tide of rumors that had begun to brush against his own carefully guarded past. Maybe it was the sting of perceived betrayal from individuals he had once considered trusted allies. Or perhaps it was the weight of knowing that his voice too had been captured on those infamous tapes played behind closed doors, a silent witness to events he could no longer ignore. Whatever the catalyst, Will Smith was done with the carefully constructed silence. He wasn't there as the charismatic celebrity the world had come to adore. He stood there as a man, a human being burdened by the weight of what he had witnessed, the secrets he had kept, and the words he had left unspoken for far too long. And as he began to walk slowly but deliberately towards the witness stand, a profound sense of anticipation settled over the courtroom. The air crackled with unspoken questions, a collective understanding that what Will Smith was about to reveal about Diddy, the clandestine parties, the insidious manipulation, and the pervasive fear that had gripped so many, wasn't just going to be explosive. It was going to be a stark and chilling warning. The day had begun with the familiar rhythm of the Diddy trial. The room hummed with the low drone of hushed conversations. The press corps hunched in their designated rows like watchful predators, and the legal teams huddled in tight circles, their whispers weaving intricate strategies as they awaited the arrival of the next scheduled witness. But the routine was about to be shattered. When the side doors of the courtroom swung inward and Will Smith, a figure instantly recognizable to every person present, stepped into the room, utterly alone, the atmosphere underwent an immediate and profound transformation. There was no entourage flanking him, no phalanx of legal advisors, no preceding announcement to prepare the room for his arrival. A silence descended, so absolute that the proverbial pin could have been heard dropping onto the polished floor. Some initially believed it to be a mistake, a wrong turn. Others whispered that it must be some elaborate legal stunt. But the way Will Smith moved, his gait slow and deliberate, his focus unwavering, the familiar Fresh Prince buoyancy replaced by a raw and somber intensity, conveyed a stark truth. This was unequivocally real. Judge Thompson, his brow furrowed in undisguised surprise, raised an eyebrow, signaling for order. Diddy, who had been reclining smugly at the defense table, a posture of practiced nonchalance, suddenly straightened, his eyes narrowing, a flicker of unease crossing his features. Will Smith walked directly towards the witness stand, his gaze fixed straight ahead, making no eye contact with anyone in the room. He didn't even afford Diddy a cursory glance. He stood before the clerk, took the oath, his voice low but resonant, and then turned slightly towards Judge Thompson. "I wasn't asked to come here today, Your Honor," Will began, his voice carrying a weight that transcended his usual charismatic tones. "I asked if I could speak." Judge Thompson, after a brief, almost imperceptible pause, nodded slowly. "The court will allow it, Mr. Smith." From that moment onward, the entire trajectory of the trial irrevocably shifted. What Will Smith was about to articulate wasn't part of any pre-existing media narrative, wasn't a strategically leaked piece of information on social media, wasn't a carefully crafted public statement. It was something that had haunted him for years, a dark undercurrent beneath the bright surface of his Hollywood success, something that had its genesis at a party, a gathering that those who attended were implicitly, if not explicitly, instructed never to discuss. "I've kept a lot inside for a long time," he continued, his gaze sweeping across the silent courtroom, a hint of pain flickering in his eyes. "I've laughed on red carpets. I've accepted prestigious awards. I've even made movies about honor and strength, about standing up for what's right. But none of that, none of the accolades or the carefully constructed image, can truly hide what I saw, what I personally experienced, and the individual who orchestrated it all." He turned his head just slightly, his gaze finally settling with a quiet intensity on Diddy. "You did, Shaun." Will Smith then recounted to the hushed courtroom the genesis of his involvement, a narrative that, on the surface, mirrored the countless invitations that circulate within the upper echelons of Hollywood. It started like many Hollywood stories do, with an invitation. It came through a mutual contact, someone I had worked with and trusted before. The way they framed it, it was supposed to be a celebration, Diddy's birthday. Nothing overtly wild or out of the ordinary, just music, networking, a place where stars could unwind and connect. I had been to similar gatherings before, so I didn't question it initially. But the moment Will Smith arrived at the designated location, a gnawing sense of unease began to take root. It was at this massive, sprawling mansion, nestled deep in the hills. Black SUVs lined the driveway, security personnel were everywhere, their presence more akin to a fortress than a party. The second I stepped inside the opulent foyer, my phone was immediately taken from me. That should have been the first glaring red flag. They said it was for privacy, to protect the anonymity of the guests, but it felt like something else entirely, like they didn't want anything that transpired within those walls to ever get out. He was then ushered further inside the mansion, into a dimly lit space where the music was low and strangely ambient, a rhythmic pulse that felt almost hypnotic. There were no visible cameras that you could readily see, but there were mirrors everywhere, strategically placed. It created this unsettling feeling, like someone was always watching, observing from unseen vantage points. Will Smith testified that after a few obligatory drinks and some strained, casual conversations with other attendees, Diddy approached him directly, his demeanor shifting from affable host to something more calculating. He said something along the lines of, "Now you're part of the family, Will." And then he gave me that smile. That wasn't warmth or genuine camaraderie. It felt like ownership, like I had unknowingly entered,